hope all of you are well. I need to turn my light on. Dear Lord, it's dark in here. How are all of you doing? I hope well. It is not my fault that Sunday decided to have his return stream right now. And so everyone's over there. Motherfucker. That motherfucker. Fucking this. I have 2 times a week that I stream regularly. He picks one of those. Of course he does. He's got to display dominance. That's how it works. And he will win out over a Klossowski rating. So good for him. Go over there, give him some love. That's perfectly fine by me. We are reading Klossowski's Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle today. And we are moving a bit forward in chapter 4, which is a focus on the valetudinary states that Nietzsche goes through and discusses in his work and how they sort of happen to come together. As we made our way through, the focus has really been, I'll see if I hope I can make my way back to it, has really been working through this schema. This schema. He's going to use that word a lot. The schema up front, sort of where a lot of this comes down to, is talking about how healthy and morbid the health, again, and all of the connotations of it, and morbidity, illness, sickness, and all of the connotations that sort of go with that, how these things work and how they specifically sort of play into gregariousness, decadence, the unintelligible versus the intelligible, the morbid versus the healthy, the way that these binaries sort of interplay. The big play that we're making here is the way that, like, the interaction of them, the central aporia of the entire thing, generates a singularity, a singular inside of it. And there is a lot of affirming potential in the singular. This tends to show up on, as you can see, the weak, the decadent, the degenerate, the unexchangeable, the unintelligible. The setup here is working through this, which seems to be Nietzsche almost totally contradicting himself, which is, to be fair, a very Nietzsche thing to fucking do, to say the least. But hey, that's kind of just where we are today. So we are one row down and back over. Sorry, making my way all the way back to schema. We've been talking through mostly these pieces. We had just gone through in the previous sort of paragraph, dealing with sort of the way that modern consciousness is toothless, unable to chew, unable to digest. And again, chewing, ruminating, like a cow with its cud. It chews, it digests, it gets everything it can out of it. And that the buffoon, which is the gregarious voice of the sanity of the institution, I think is the phrasing that Nietzsche uses and they use, that the buffoon will have the last word over the philosopher, while the philosopher will flounder. So now, why is that aporia structurally necessary and not simply accidental? That's our big focus today. So if you have questions, as always, do not hesitate to post them in various chats. Do not hesitate to throw them at me. Say whatever. Love having you here. Thank you for joining, and we'll have a good time. The schema that sets morbid and healthy symptoms in opposition to each other has its source in the schema that sets the signs of gregariousness and singularity in opposition. In Nietzsche's reflections, these two schemata were interchangeable and convertible. Every personal declaration is first of all a phylogenetic order. By consequence, the species is present in the terms used to designate that which excludes the species, in the experience characteristic of the singular state, or that which excludes from the species the subject who singularizes this experience. In order to valorize the declaration of the singular, language will have to circumscribe the singular muteness. and what it contains that is unintelligible to the species with respect to the intelligibility required by gregarious institutions. But this is not to say that what forms the unintelligible depth of the singular case has always been so for the whole of the species. I kind of pre-hinted at this. The question is this the way things are, or is this something that has been built over time? That is the question. Like, again, is it accidental in time, contingent to this, or is this something that is determined because we are people or whatever? The answer, by the way, hint, accidental. But he's going to go through and sort of make that argument. And as such, we now go through each of the lines to talk through what they mean and how they mean. The schema, please say this is working on YouTube, in opposition to the schema that sets morbid and healthy symptoms in opposition to each other has its source in the schema that sets the signs of gregariousness and singularity in opposition. Please say it's working on YouTube. It is good. This is basically the beginning of that, and we've seen this hinted at and insinuated and a little bit stated actually so far in this paragraph. This is more or less Klossowski's main architectural argument of what Nietzsche is doing, the diagnostic process of the whole thing. He's not simply saying that Nietzsche is talking about two binary grids. Again, we've gone through this. The schema is definitely not binary, not in that sense. Instead, we're talking about a derivation of it, right? That the healthy and morbid is grounded in, that it is generated by the schema itself, right? The healthy morbid schema derived from the gregarious singular. He's been going through kind of how these things come about. I've been putting up videos on this. If you can't tell, this has been sort of eating into my brain. I've been putting out videos on this because this is a thing that I think a lot of us are, especially in the capitalist system, are able to see happening pretty regularly. The consequences of this specifically are pretty significant. Health and morbid, death or illness and healthiness. These aren't natural terms. Not really. These are not biological primitives that you can find a truth in. These are naturally relational. There's always already a institutional designation that is from the standpoint of the herd, a normative, gregarious herd mentality around this. If we say something is morbid, it is being judged from the gregarious normative. If we say something is healthy, it is being judged in that same way. The way that, for example, Foucault, Madison's Civilization, who touches into this, I think, extremely well in the book, talks through how pathological categories have been built and assembled through the way that institutional logics of exclusion happen. It's not just simply a neutral claim in the clinic. That, which preceded this book, and a lot of what Klossowski ended up doing, is sort of the junior version of here. Klossowski's taking Nietzsche through that and saying it's not just that the categories are constructed. It's that they are ontologically structured in this differential between the singularities and gregarious, or the intensive and the extensive. So it's not just that it's an ideology, which is what Foucault sort of was arguing. He's making an argument here that it's ontological, that it is impulsive, that it is based in the way that the impulses come together and predates in process anything that might be called ideological, right? There's a reason this book is dedicated to Deleuze. If you're not part of our anti-Oedipus reading every Tuesday, I highly, highly suggest it. But that's more or less the same argument made in very, very similar terms, using the same ontological sort of arguments, sort of at a basic level. Does that make sense to everyone? I hope so. In Nietzsche's reflections, these two schemata, which is such a good word, were interchangeable and convertible. Nietzsche is fascinating this way. There's an isomorphism in the schema, the schemata, the elements of the schema. What a fucking good word. I don't even know if I've ever said it before. Schemata. For Nietzsche and how he was working with them, they can substitute for each other. They can interchange because they share more or less, again, that same underlying structure, that differential between the communicable on the sort of register side of that and the incommunicable on that register. So the morbid and singular viewed from the gregarious language, the singular is amorbid viewed from intensive. There's a positionality from it that's really interesting. What's a schemata? The interrelation of the schema. So we'll take a second and look at the schema again, because that is a worthwhile question from the YouTubes. Here is a schema. Schema. Shaken, not stirred. Stirred. So the schema here, schema. I'm never going to be able to say that correctly again. The schema here is simple. We have basically down two sides, right? So on one side, we have decadence, morbidity, and weakness. On the other side of things, we have the vigorous, the healthy, and the powerful. These things come about for Klossowski and for Nietzsche as they're sort of placing it. They're placing them in specific spots. They're placing them as an opposition to, the singular versus the gregarious, which is really the sort of core thing they're talking about. So this whole thing is a schema. The schemata is the relations between these and sort of the positionality. So when we talk about decadence being singular, that's more or less seen from the gregarious position, right? Vigor as being healthy, seen from these positions. As schemata is the relational elements between them, as he's kind of using it. And again, not a perfect, don't fucking use my answer in a fucking test, but that's more or less what we're kind of witnessing here. So the two schemata, these two specifically, morbid and healthy, these two schemata were interchangeable and convertible. And that's the phrasing that's sort of happening here. Interchangeable and convertible. Because it's able to be done. Sounds like an old Hindi word. It does kind of. It's a really cool sounding word. But that's kind of the idea more or less. The underlying structure of them and how they come about are relational in very particular ways. The morbid is the singular from gregarious. The singular is the morbid viewed from intensivity. Same phenomena, but the coordinate systems, the schema, which is schema is about like the mathematics of it, right? That's the thing. It's the same phenomena, but different schema, different coordinate systems. And this is why Nietzsche and his self-analysis was seemingly unstable, right? Again, if you haven't watched a handful of people read it, everyone will come away with a different thing unless they really spend time with Nietzsche. He was always switching between these reference frames. And he didn't ever really try to stabilize his position or the position of his philosophy in either. He had this, like, Klossowski talked about it as his censoring, tyrannical internal voice. That's what it's a couple pages ago. Like that censoring oscillated between diagnosing himself with weakness as having like a morbid frame and a weak mind and all that. And then did it also with this exceptional singular frame that he saw things through. But that oscillation itself isn't decidable, right? Because the frames are convertible and the frames are the deal for Nietzsche. The frames are the deal for all of these guys, to be really frank, but the frames are the deal here. The interchangeability, the framing of it, the frames, the register, like these are the things they're sort of playing with. The rest of this, there's three paragraphs total I want to get through today. I have a hard stop at 2, but these 3 paragraphs I think are going to explain kind of what I'm talking about. At least I'm hoping, at least in some capacity they do. Like this one. Every personal declaration is first of all a phylogenetic order. By consequence, the species is present in the terms used to designate that which excludes the species in the experience characteristic of the singular state, or that which excludes from the species the subject who singularizes this experience. So, there's a lot said. This is a fucking big sentence. I hate when they do this. Phylogenetic is a biology term. Okay. This is a Darwinian talk, Ray, phylogenetic. It doesn't just mean a history of a species. Not directly. It kind of touches that. It's more the sedimentation of impulse patterns in the structure of communicable signs. So language isn't really representing gregarious experience, not directly. We don't really have a gregarious experience. Instead, what language is doing is it's expressing gregarious impulses, and it's crystallizing those. So like Nietzsche writes at one point, Nietzsche says, I am dynamite, which is a whole thing. He's claiming a singular explosive sort of thing. The grammar of the sentence itself, I am dynamite, is so tight and simple. It's the way it uses identity, the way it uses exchangeability. I am this other thing. I am waves, he says. You and I are one. The gregarious normativity and exchangeability he's playing with is there. The I that declares itself as singular, I am, that's already this phantom of the gregarious. So the impulsive designation that we're sort of seeing the early parts of here, this is Klossowski trying to sort of designate singularity within language, if that makes sense. So every personal declaration is first of all a phylogenetic order. You have, and it's from my video, you have, when you speak, the herd is in your mouth. You are talking, you are using the language of communicability. You're not playing with your own representations. Is that Chrysippus is, when I speak, what does he say? What's the phrase? Well, it doesn't matter. I can use anything. When I say catapult, the word catapult comes across my lips. Therefore, a catapult is leaving my lips. But it's not a catapult. You're utilizing the interchangeable and convertible at large order. And by consequence, the species is present in the terms used to designate that which excludes the species in the experience characteristic of a singular state. When I say I, it is first phylogenetic, and as such, the species is present even in the word I. When I say I am speaking. In that act, I am incanting. It's an incantation bringing about. That's the jam here. It's an incantation bringing about all of this. Right? Does that make sense? Both of you? 3 of you? Does that make sense to anyone who's here? Generally speaking? I'm hoping so. Because it's the phrasing of it is very, very important. The phrasing of it is super important. Okay, good. The other half of that, and it's the second part. Every personal declaration is first of all phylogenetic, or that which excludes from the species the subject who singularizes the experience. By having all of that in there, by having all of these put in, there is almost instant, like, removal of the self. It's already a phantasm of the gregarious. That's the fundamental thing happening at a basic level. Yeah. So he continues. In order to valorize, let me grab, boop, boop. In order to valorize the declaration of the singular, language will have to circumscribe the singular muteness. Circumscribe is really specific, and he's kind of using it in a handful of interesting ways. The impulsivity of this is sort of the front and center. The way that it works is it marks borders, circumscribes the singular muteness. It adds a border to it. It indicates by negation what's there, right? Oh, Rudyard's just making fun of how I pronounce things. That's all. It's in love, I know, but that's all they're doing, LJ. Yeah, the wording is interesting. When we talk about the singular that's in there, in order to valorize the declaration of the singular, language has to circumscribe the muteness. If I were able to describe myself, like I can't because it's necessarily singular. Oh, Lone Pants, you're very kind. Thank you very much. Very, very kind of you, Lone. The gregarious valorizes the singular, but it doesn't do it directly because it can't. The singular is mute. So how does it do that? Well, it circumscribes around it. It builds around it. It builds a border around that thing. It's the negative of the intensive. And it's a very particular thing that's happening here. It's a very particular thing that's happening here. The way that institutions work, they don't just prefer intelligibility. The at large, people don't just prefer it. If something's unintelligible, it's simply not there. There's a requirement of intelligibility fundamentally in the way that all this shit works. What can't be intelligible to the herd is not able to be processed, preserved, transmitted, held, understood in any capacity like that. And so that necessarily has to be repressed into the unconscious. It has to be shifted how it works. It has to be expelled as perverse, as mad, as insanity, as criminal, as external, whatever those things are. The way that it has to work is through that circumscription. And that's the second part of the sentence. What it contains that is unintelligible to the species with respect to the intelligibility required by gregarious institutions. But this is not to say that what forms the unintelligible depth of the singular case has always been so for the whole of the species. How about music? How about music? Someone on YouTube's asking. Well, music is actually a really worthwhile conversation to have here for a moment. When someone is playing music, actually, I literally talk about this in one of my videos. Maybe the one I put out yesterday or today. If you've ever been to a concert or a performance of music, even if it's live, even if it's a studio recording, whatever it is, there are qualities to that simply cannot make its way into whatever can be quantified. Yeah, we have recordings of things, that's great, but the experience of it is not the same thing. They literally can't be. I can go through a lot of discussion around this, but I'm just letting you know, we don't know how to do that, and we've really, 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 really tried, and there's a lot of technology trying to do that. That recording of the thing, turning it into notes, turning it into specificity, saying it is this thing, ruins it. Opera. If you've ever really listened to opera or barely listened, you will have heard a vibrato in the voice of most of the singers that is extraordinary, and it has its own oscillation that's just very odd. but it can't be really marked. It's not a note, although they're only singing a note, but they're not really singing a, and now we're lost. That's it. This is the unintelligibility. It ends up becoming something that we're able to sort of be aware of, but it can't ever be written down or used. And there's actual discussions. There's actual discussions on YouTube and inside of opera circles, and for pop, especially popera, which is a term, the way that maybe we should get rid of the vibrato because it can't be recorded and that it can't be, simply replicated. These are real things people talk about. I hate it. But like, these things are pushed back. These things are pushed back. Always, always, always. Intelligible doesn't just mean that you are able to sense a thing. It is, are you able to sense exactly the thing that the person has? When I have, or I'm turning what I'm feeling or experiencing or thinking or anything into words that I am sharing with you, I am necessarily making my impulses and everything within me intelligible. And as such, I'm slicing things off, even if it's musical, because music has its own rules. It has its own limits. It has its own things. It has to be within certain registers. It has to be within certain hertz. Like, there's all these things that we don't realize are actually carving off of the intense, crazy complexity of all the shit that's rolling around inside of us. This is unintelligible. That's the thing. That's the thing. Right? And so, this is not to say that what forms the unintelligible death of the singular case has always been so. The argument we're starting with, this is kind of the start of, I think, the brunt of what we're going to be going through for the next couple paragraphs, or really the rest of the section, is to be talking about that there is, as a historical claim, what is currently unintelligible as we talk about it is not a thing that always has been. It's only relative to present institutional conditions, even ones that shift for the last few hundred years. This moment in the species' phylogenetic development, the same intensive states may have become common, shared, or even constitutive of our species in general. So that changes. Right? What is currently unintelligible is only unintelligible to our institutions. We'll be talking about this in this next paragraph, because the development of the singular case is kind of a big deal. But again, the return, just to go back to the eternal return, the vicious circle, the eternal return is not the return of the same in a simple sense. It is the reemergence of intensive states that had been buried thanks to this phylogenetic backing. The singular case isn't really creating something new. It's more or less remembering something that the species has forgotten. Sort of. Nietzsche used the term Dionysian a lot later on in his sort of works, right? And this is because the singular case structurally pushed him to that. It's not, for him, Dionysus wasn't excess for excess, like excess for what it is, but instead an almost archaic excess, impulsion that predates and threatens the Apollonian structures of the gregarious and intelligible. That's kind of the play that's happening here. He says on YouTube, but isn't that impossible? Well, isn't that impossible? For example, I can describe you a car, but you can shape it however you want. I can't provide the exact semantic guarantee you will think. That's literally his point. And so as such, the thing that's important with that is the realization that, yes, and it's not knocking communication, it's understanding how it functions. If I'm trying to tell you how I'm feeling for the day, I've got kids, I use this example a lot, and I'm going to continue to. I have a couple kids, and early in their lives, whenever they get hurt or something happens, everything is either sad or mad, or like that's it. Every injury is the same. Every worry, every fear. As they get older, they become more like us, where they can basically diversify how horrific the world is. But like that thing where they're learning how to communicate the emotion of being hungry. They say they're hungry. Are they? Or like, what is hunger? Well, it's how they're describing and sloughing off all of the other parts, because there's a lot of things that are part of that, but they're saying it in a way that's intelligible. And as such, you do that enough, these things then sort of take on a bit of a life of their own. We'll get to that. How much do Eastern religions play off the unintelligible? Koans and the ideas are taught. Koans are absolutely like part and parcel of what we're talking about. So I wouldn't say Eastern religions. That the idea of the unanswerable is a thing that it's amazingly global. Koans are probably my favorite version of it, but I'm going through and I'm doing a lot of work with the Stoics of very, very old, who adored fucking with people and just wrote so many weird, like crazy paradoxes that are almost impossible sentences for the exact same reason. That's playing towards the unintelligible for a reason. So yeah, no, Jeremy, exactly. It's that kind of thing. Exactly. So that's kind of how I'd sum up this paragraph. Before we move to the next, I kind of just want to get to it pretty quick. But before we do, is there a question or two? Anyone have a thing specific, especially here in the Discordy? Because it's more or less setting things up, so it's not like it's not a full thing. We're kind of just starting there, right? Like this is the hinge of the chapter. Moving from the very, very structured presentation of things that we've been to, getting more into the lived dynamic account of all of it. Now the singular case, and then the eternal return as experience, then vicious circle. That's kind of the order of things, to steal from Foucault. This depth is something you wouldn't want to dive in at 3 a.m. You would be surprised at the times I do weird readings. But no, it's not for everyone. It's for sure. This is there's a beauty to Klossowski's writing that I think works. If you just do like a faster reading and you're just going through, I think there's something about the way this book is written that I think enables a lighter reading. So, I can recommend it that way, at least. Probably. All right. We'll do the next paragraph then. From this point of view, the singular case represents a forgetting of previous experiences, which are either assimilated to the gregarious impulses by being relegated to the unconscious and thus reprimanded by the reigning censure, or on the contrary, are rejected as being unassimilable to the conditions required for the existence of both the species and the individual within the species. For Nietzsche, the singular case rediscovers, in an anachronistic manner, an ancient way of existing, whose reawakening in itself presupposes that present conditions do not correspond to the impulsive state which is, in some manner, being affirmed through it. Depending on the strength of its intensity, however, this singular state, though anachronistic in relation to the institutional level of gregariousness, can bring about a de-actualization of that institution itself and denounce it, in turn, as anachronistic. That every reality as such comes to be de-actualized in relation to the singular case, that the resulting emotion seizes the subject's behavior and forces it into action. This is an adventure that can modify the course of events, following a circuit of chance, that Nietzsche will make the dimension of his thought. To the extent that he isolates its periodicity in history, The plan for a conspiracy appears under the sign of the vicious circle. Conspiracy. I prefer conspiracies like this. A lot less presidents and politicians raping kids. It's good. I prefer this. I miss this kind of conspiracy. It's a good conspiracy in comparison. As you might be able to see, we're starting to make our way towards Nietzsche's experience at Sils-Maria, where he had his break, where the eternal return came about, and he had these glorious things that he began to write in his letters about. This is where we are starting to be introduced to the most important concepts of all of it, in my opinion. This is my opinion. This book has a lot of concepts. These are my opinions. The three sort of things that we're seeing here, it is the case of forgetting, it is deactualization, and the conspiracy of the vicious circle. This is going to be where this is a big part for this book, I think. So let's take the first opening and we'll just go through. From this point of view, the singular case represents a forgetting of previous experiences, which are either assimilated to the gregarious impulses by being relegated to the unconscious and thus recommended by... I'm going to end up going through all of this. This is just this is such a dense, long sentence. I hate this. Okay. There's no way to break this up either, is there? God damn it. Let's try. So we have an archaic experience. The singular is an archaic experience, out of time, not in an incorrect time. It's anachronistic, but it's archaic. It's old. It's out of place. It's a thing that needs to be handled by the gregarious. So how does the institution, from this point of view, how does the institution handle forgetting? Like memory management as a state, as a group, as a country, as a people, at large, the herd, right? How is it that this gets handled? Well, there's kind of two ways. Either, he says one, either assimilated to the gregarious impulses by being relegated to the unconscious and thus reprimanded by the reigning censure. The singular state, the archaic singular state, doesn't get destroyed, but becomes almost domesticated, assimilated to the gregarious impulses, relegated, thus reprimanded. Think of it, I like domesticated as a word here for this, because the censure is kind of the thing doing the work. That internal dad, you might say. And again, wonder if this touches into another book I read. The way Freud talks about repression is not far from here, but Klossowski's doing a different thing with it. For Freud, the way that like the unconscious works as an agency of a sort of psychic movement and has its own logic, it can do all these things, symptoms, dreams, and all this. Klossowski's been saying the unconscious is actually an institutional product. So the unconscious is not explicitly the impulses. The unconscious is actually the impulses that generate phantasms that get communicated and then repressed. And that repressed element, that thing that happens there, is actually an institutional product. Whatever the gregarious censures, whatever it rules out of communicable existence, becomes this. The unconscious isn't like a depth below consciousness. It's a byproduct of the gregarious operation. Does that make sense? It's a really interesting way to consider it, and it falls very much in line with Anti-Oedipus as well. These books are very, very similar in how they describe things. It is a slight difference. The unconscious is not machinic here. He's not playing with that. He's saying, no. The emergence from everything that exists that sort of is produced through us and then society then crushes and pushes back, that's actually a byproduct of the exact same thing, consciousness. Like, this is a play and it's a waste product almost. Then he says the second part, which is after the semicolon here, or on the contrary, are rejected as being unassimilable to the conditions required for the existence of both the species and the individual within the species. Okay. So if it's fully rejected because it's unassimilable, okay, because one is, again, assimilation, domestication, it can be done, it does get done, and as such gets relegated to the unconscious. It's, oh, well, we can't understand that fully, but it's, it's a thing we do. But then it's, wait, this can't be absorbed into the unconscious. It's too fucking weird. It's too alien. It's too outside of the gregarious economic system entirely. It can't be converted into something that can be repressed. That is outright expelled. Rejected. This we label as madness. This we label as crime. This we label as perversion. This we label as monstrous. All of those things. The distinction is going to be really important, right? Assimilation to unconsciousness maintains the state within the individual. So if you're neurotic, if you are psychotic, if you are, fucking type A or this or that there's a state that's maintained. It just becomes a symptom. It's a compromise of you and your behavior. That's how we talk about these things. It's, it's a compromise. We're going to hold back. Rejecting outright means that basically the state you're in is external to not only species, but also individual. So the assimilation is like saying, oh, individual, it's in you. Gross. You're fucking weird. But that's not too weird. Then there's, well, you don't even count as a person. The difference between the time is not right for this and now this, that's not far off. That's not far off, Noisy Cats. That's not far off. It's, actually, that's probably a better, like if you're thinking of like a parent saying that to a child, yes, it's not far from that. It's just a phase that you're going through. We can assimilate it as a phase. Oh, it's just, look, you're just in your head. Don't worry about it. This homosexuality or this drug use or this not caring about things that matter. These are just, it's weird behaviors. You're just doing a thing. Then there's, and again, gregarious is going to be the setup here. No son of mine. Like that I can't believe you're even, that's unthinkable that you would even consider, like it breaks it out entirely, separates everything. That thing that's happening here, the first one being reprimanded by the censure is incredibly pointed and important here. Because again, this is not really psychological as a mechanism, because for Klossowski, it's not internal. These things, this is not like everything's in your head. This is institutional. This is the systems we are a part of, the norms, the practices, the gregarious, the herd, the judgments, all of these things that society uses and is part of, that police this boundary between intelligible and unintelligible, between what can be incorporated, what must be expelled. But that second layer, which is can be incorporated, and can be incorporated is your weird dalliance. You're just what a weirdo. He's such an eccentric. He's such an eccentric versus freak show, put him in jail, lock him up. Nope, off to the mountains with you. Go to the hole. We don't want, like, that thing that's happening. Different, purely outside of both. That's the big deal. And yes, this is a political play. It's going to be political. There's no way to get around all of it, since all of this is one and the same thing. So yeah, isn't repression dangerous? No, and yes. Repression as such is just a thing. Any given repression is going to have to be dealt with on its own. a murderous rampage anger that someone has. I'm okay with that being repressed. I'm okay with that. It's going to be hit or miss, we'll say. The thing that, like in this, that I think is worth coming through real quick. Noisy says, reigning seems an important temporal qualification. At some other time in reigning, prevailing will be different. Clever one. Yeah, that's absolutely the point. Because again, as institutions change, the reigning censure would shift as well. All of these things will. And as such, what is in or weird and eccentric or super out of bounds also will change. And these will shift in everything. Because again, the mechanics of all of this is all of it. It's everything. There's no part of it that doesn't sort of involve itself in all of this shit. Right? I want to go back to that first sentence, which I really, really like. It's a weird one, but there's a word in here. Oh, no, stop. Forgetting. The singular case represents a forgetting of previous experiences. The forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is an effect of the institutional processing itself. So, previous intensive experiences. We've got a bunch of them. You have a bunch of them happening right now that you're processing and are being processed at large right now. But the previous ones were either repressed or expelled. What we call forgetting is, again, the sort of result of the sediment of those operations across all of these things. I'll continue to use that because there's a lot of reasons for it. The singular case here rediscovers an archaic way of existing, not remembers. These words are very, very important to Nietzsche and like crazy, crazy important to Klossowski, because remembering and memory is not the same thing as re-emerging, reappearing. It's not even reappearing. It's coming back through this strata, encountering the full force of everything in the first place. Remembering would be a reflection of that, not encountering it all over again. There's a distinction that's really important. I think I got it wrong. Isn't it like a distinction between deliberately rejecting and unconsciously rejecting? There's no such thing as deliberately or unconsciously rejecting. It's the herd that does all of it. The herd, as in society, as in the social, as in the people you're around, and all of us are around, and culture and all that shit. All that fucking shit. So he continues. For Nietzsche, the singular case rediscovers in an anachronistic manner an ancient way of existing, whose reawakening in itself presupposes that present conditions do not correspond to the impulsive state, which is in some manner being affirmed through it. Anachronism is an interesting one as an ontological category. I don't actually know a lot of other books that talk about it like this. So there's a couple claims that I want to go through that he's making that I think are important, and you can tell me if you get it or if I'm making no sense. The first is the singular case as an anachronism. Anachronistic, which is in like scare quotes as a thing. He's really using this in like a technical sense when he does that. From the standpoint of the gregarious, the singular appears anachronistic, a misfit temporality, right? Something that belongs to an earlier or out of time state of things, something that doesn't have a place now. It's anachronistic. It's outside of current time, is the idea. It's not really meant to be super futuristic, but it might be just outside of our time. And we have our time. That's important. From the standpoint of what Klossowski's doing here, though, there's no such thing as the present, like in a stable sense, right? If you remember earlier in the book, he kind of talked about there's no stability in time. That's not really a thing. We don't really have grounding on these things. So what appears to be an anachronism is again, from the institutional perspective, that is what this paragraph is from this point of view, from the institutional point of view, right? That's important. What the institution experiences it as is like a breakthrough of this impulsive state or singular that has been covered over but never extinguished. The way that the singular is experienced by the institution is as a crack, as a breakthrough returning. The way that this singular works is something that is said by the gregarious. It's not really a description of what's actually happening. This is why this book is really tough. Again, this book's not exactly easy to read. I get it, but this is like crazy and interesting. When you start realizing he's doing the thing he's talking about, and he's very particular, saying from this point of view, from this setup, from all of that. And the second thing he does here is he's playing with non-correspondence, whose reawakening in itself presupposes that present conditions do not correspond to the impulsive state, which is in some manner being affirmed through it. This sentence is not like a small one. It's like this. It's a negative claim ontologically, but it's kind of a big deal. The singular state reawakens, right? By doing so, it's evidence that the current order that claims total knowledge isn't that. It's not what it claims to be. The natural order is not a fulfillment of impulsive life. Because it experiences these things as breakthroughs of the past. It's outside of time. The singular, it's tribal, that's old. Whatever it is, people use a million terms to describe all of these fucking things. These people are so backwards here. Like whatever it is, it's always this very strange way of talking about it always being from the past. No one ever goes, well, that guy's very weird. He must be a time traveler. Like, no, he's a time traveler the other way is somehow workable. And that really strange thing, it means that the way that the gregarious exists is not as a fulfillment of impulses. If it was, it would be able to handle any singularity that exists underneath. If it's a fulfillment, it would be able to make do with all of it. It can't. Instead, it's, oh God, that's outside of time. That's anachronistic. That's all of this. Therefore, it is a suppression of it. The singular case exists as like a gap between the lived and the institutional. So when we look at Nietzsche's illness and his madness, when he snapped, this is why Klossowski can't just pathologize it away, and why we shouldn't, and why, again, a lot of the work in Anti-Oedipus and a lot of the work for Marcuse or Foucault and Lacan and others make this exact same thing, that the very intensity that ruptured the institutional existence for Nietzsche is evidence that the intensive substrate of existence isn't exhausted by the gregarious or the institutional. It can't be. It's a very simple logical claim that I think works really great. I mean, I mentioned Marcuse. Marcuse does this. I mean, a lot of guys do this. I reference Marcuse in the upcoming video. If you haven't realized, a lot of my videos are about the repression of the surplus lately, because that's like capitalism's thing. And that's Marcuse's shit. Surplus repression is like his entire jam. Civilization functionally requires more repression than is necessary for itself to be perpetuated and perpetrate everything it does. That surplus that exists generates a counter pressure. That's what Marcuse was saying like a decade before this. I like Marcuse. I'm a fan. I'm glad you like it, Organelles. Klossowski he's not disagreeing with that, but he's even taking it further, because for him, again, there's no reality that ever is reconcilable with the singular. The gap between the singular and the totality is not something to be overcome. This is a thing for Deleuze as well, that we don't have better social arrangements that will stop repression. That's not how it works. The feature of the structural reality of intensive existence works this way within any institutional order. There's no way to build a society that can handle all of these things. Definitionally. See, and organize. Only one person got. I do this entire video on how people have to basically like slough off and be very careful about what they say and how everything gets slimmed. And there's a point in the video where literally I like show that I'm reading off a teleprompter, and no one picked up on that. I thought it was I overthink things is like the big thing I realize. I overthink what I do, and I'm just like, I'm so clever. It's not clever. It's not fun. It's no fun in this brain. It's not good. I thought it was funny, but no one else thought it was funny. That's okay. Everyone missed it. It's okay. Everyone missed it. One person was like laughing about it, and I was like, that was intended. Fuck me. I was listening at work. I watched it with a friend, laughed at it. Good. Made me laugh. Good. Someone else laughed at it. Happy day. Okay. To continue. Depending on the strength of its intensity, however, this singular state, though anachronistic in relation to the institutional level of gregariousness, can bring about a deactualization of that institution itself and denounce it in turn as anachronistic. Oh, let's make it nice and complicated. Okay. This is the structural reversal of deactualization. Deactualization is not a small idea for Klossowski. It is not a small idea for Deleuze. They use different words for it. Counteractualization is what they're playing with these things at the same time. They end up going in a lot of directions with it. Guattari ends up actually really helping them fix their language around that, which is really interesting. But here's the logic of what's happening in this paragraph, okay? From this gregarious perspective, which this entire paragraph is, like focused, the institutional, right? I thought you forgot to cut out wiping dust off the lens and watching the background, so I missed the first. It was me adjusting and rewinding. Yeah, it doesn't matter. From the gregarious, okay, from that perspective, the singular is anachronistic. It isn't actual. It isn't present. It's not real by standards of any institutional, gregarious, herd reality. It's not seen as such. It is outside of time. That's what we've been talking about. Is how backwards, blah, blah, blah. It's not real in the sense of like people actually doing it. You know how I get mad when people make the comment like, oh, the Trump voters are just too stupid to understand what they're doing if they really saw the truth, that kind of shit. Whatever people do, stuff that is like just not in line with gregarious norms, we make excuses for them, and what they're doing just isn't real or actual. Not in the same way I am, not in the same way my stuff is. That's the thing, right? These things aren't actual. This is a feature. This is part of how this works. If the singular state's intensity is sufficient, it actually inverts this judgment. This is a really interesting way to talk about modern institutions and how they work, because the institution as a thing becomes revealed to be itself anachronistic, but it just is dependent on the intensity, the power of that singular, the way that singular sort of exists. The institution exists clinging to conditions that don't correspond to an underlying impulsive reality. All institutions, all of them. The singular case that shows up that's too powerful for it shows it to not be present. It shows that the present has failed it, right? And it shows the present doesn't work with the institution, and it sort of destroys it as a thing. Deactualizing is the term that Klossowski uses for this, right? Same with religious discussions. It's the same exact thing. It's Can I make the PDF black? That's a little racist. The setup at the base of this is that, like, deactualization. It doesn't mean the destruction of the institution. It's not the inversion of it or the negation of the institution. The institution sort of continues to exist. Like, the building, its norms, the arrangement of things that make it up, like, continue to be, right? What becomes deactualized is the institution's claim to be actual in a full sense, the experience of that institution as actual. Its authority to define what is real, what isn't real, what is healthy, what isn't healthy, what is rational, what is present. The singular deactualizes it, and the institution persists, but does so as a phantasm of itself, a shell structure. And the claim that it will have, and it has had, to constitute what is real is exposed as passé, historical artifact, thing that's like left over. And that's the phrasing he ends with. It, bring about the deactualization of the institution and denounce it in turn as anachronistic. There's a very specific thing he's playing out here, right? The singular, through its intensity, returns to you're the anachronism, clinging to this impulsive organization that no longer corresponds to anything that's actually moving in the real world. This is the way that Nietzsche talks about Christianity, for example. I mean, religion in general. The way he talks about deontology from Kant, the way he talks about utilitarianism, and I think the way that a lot of us talk about various things that, the invisible hand of the market, the idea of American hegemony, these things become revealed as eternal truths, as not eternal truths, but instead historical formations, clearly there, past their moment. They still operate. They still operate, but they become ontologically bankrupt. I would argue in my lifetime, this has happened within America when it comes to America, the concept. Which sounds weird because I know a lot of people are like, I've always hated America. It's like, great. But I think within America, we've actually seen, we can see this happen in the last 20 years. The idea of America as a thing has been shown to be anachronistic. And again, the strength of the intensity is a really interesting phrase here, because this isn't like a utopian claim that the singular state will always overturn. Like, it's not some stupid bullshit like that. Again, like how some people read Deleuze by screaming, oh, just be molecular, be minority, be schizo. It's like, no, dude, that's not it. There needs to be a sufficient intensity, powerful. Weak and depressive and exhaustive singular states do not achieve deactualization. They're overwhelmed fundamentally by institutional censoring, by pathologization, by expelling, right? All of those things. This sufficient intensive force can fuck with that ontological polarity. It's going to be a big deal for Klossowski as we go, also for Deleuze, but for Klossowski in this book specifically, that the eternal return experience at Sils-Maria, which we're going to be going through probably next week, its intensity was enough, but not all the way. Like, it was just barely there to begin deactualizing institutional reality for Nietzsche. And it destroyed his institutional existence and understanding entirely. And I love that reading of Nietzsche personally. So we continue. That every reality as such comes to be deactualized in relation to the singular case, that the resulting emotion seizes the subject's behavior and forces it into action. This is an adventure that can modify the course of events, following a circuit of chance that Nietzsche will make the dimension of his thought. The last sentence I want to leave on its own. We just talked about how the singular claim works at like a particular institution and reality as such. This is the maximalist claim. It is not that this or that institution is deactualized by a singular intensity. That's not how it's not just that one against that one. Reality itself, insofar as it is constituted by these institutional norms, the reality principle, we might call it, becomes ontologically unstable in the face of sufficient singular intensity. It all breaks apart. Now it's a Sunday raid? Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. The stream was almost titled, "Sorry, I schedule it every time for this week. I'm so sorry." I hope Sunday had a very lovely stream. I saw him, I was wanting to stick around because he was going through the worst fucking, like, just the worst of YouTubers. I actually think Jang is actually worse. I've been thinking about it. I think he's worse than What If Altist. Because I think Rudyard actually believes what he's saying. I don't think Jang does. I think he's a fucking nutcase. I don't think he believes anything. But thanks all of you for coming. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're talking about Nietzsche and the vicious circle. And we're specifically talking about the way that the singular deactualizes the world of the reality, and sufficiently strong enough singularities actually can fundamentally destroy the reality principle itself. The language that Klossowski's using here is not to describe a conscious decision by the subject to act on singular experiences. Please never, ever, 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 ever take anything Klossowski or Deleuze is doing to say, oh, a person needs to do this, or this is on a person to do. That's not the phrase. That's not the setup. That's not how this works. That's not the deal. Like, fundamentally, that's not the deal. Instead, what we're talking about here is an emotion that is impersonal. It's a thing that doesn't belong to the subject as agent who chooses to act as a thing. Instead, we're talking about seizing behavior, right? Seizing behavior and forcing it into action. This is what happens here. The resulting emotion seizes the subject's behavior, forces it into action. And I love the language around here. This is an adventure that can modify the course of events. It's so great. This was published right around the time Deleuze is doing Logic of Sense. And you can tell because Deleuze in Logic of Sense talks about the event as a thing that happens to subjects. They are the site of events. They don't produce them. In that same way, like the singular case doesn't cause institutional deactualization through deliberate action of a subject. The emotion acts, and behavior is the medium of the emotion. If that makes sense. I would hope so. Is this seizing necessary? No. I mean, a strong enough intensity, it is what happens, so that it does necessitate it, but it's not necessary on its own. Again, there's a circuit of all of this that sort of matters. That's the line he has here, right? Following a circuit of chance that Nietzsche will make the dimension of his thought. The vicious circle. The eternal return, the thing that's happening here. Chance is not randomness. Chance is the non-necessity of the causal institutional nexus. Chance is the gap through which intensive states can erupt, can break through. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he has a dice throw, right? That and the eternal return are affirmation of chance. And that's what he's preparing for here. That's what he's working through here. That's the thing he's flying through here and just going straight at. And he ends with, and I'm going to make sure we recenter this because it's good as the last sentence for this. And then we're going to do one more paragraph today. To the extent that he isolates its periodicity in history, the plan for a conspiracy appears under the sign of the vicious circle. All right, the third of the concepts I mentioned. Remember? Third of the concepts of vicious circle. It's kind of a super important sentence to remember. He does this once in a while, Klossowski. let's go through a couple words that are in it, and then we can sort of break it apart, because there's some really, really explicit, important parts in this that I think we have to go through. The first is the idea of periodicity. So Nietzsche isn't experiencing this as a one-off event. That's what his experience of the eternal return, what happens at Sils-Maria, is not just a one-off thing and off he goes. He is working and begins to isolate a pattern as he does it. He starts to recognize this circuit of chance and the structure that it has. Gonna go read Eminent's Life after this reading? Yes. Yes. And again, there's a reason this book was dedicated to Gilles Deleuze. Like, there's a reason for that. To say, the circuit of chance is the structure. And the eruptions, the institutional recoveries, have a rhythm for Nietzsche. There's a thing that continues to come back and be seen sort of in historical time. This periodicity, to the extent he isolates its periodicity in history, the idea is that periodicity is like what distinguishes the eternal return as thought from the singular experience that prompted it, right? The emotions, the impulses come about, and here's poop, there's the eternal return shows up. But it's not just that. There's something that distinguishes it from that singular experience. The eternal return as thought is that thing. That thought is recognition that this circuit is cyclical, that it's constantly connected and reconnected. What happened at Sils-Maria has happened before and will happen again interminably, right? The periodicity is the temporal structure. It's important. The second word I want to go over is conspiracy. There's a very particular sense of this. It's such a good use of this word because it's such a specific meaning that he's playing with here. When Klossowski here says conspiracy, and really through the rest of this book, he's not meaning Jews in a cave. He's not doing a Professor Jang thing. Instead, he's talking about what the conspiracy does is a conspiracy is like a project of deliberately deploying a singular case's de-actualizing force against institutional reality. That's what a conspiracy does. Hey, boy, we have this global capitalist system that's incredibly complicated. Not 6 Jews in a cave. Oh, that's what conspiracy does. It de-actualizes these institutional realities. The periodicity for Nietzsche, that the singular eruptions can and do this. He has a thought, well, what if one could act on this? What if the circuit of chance could be entered deliberately rather than simply experienced or encountered? So the conspiracy is that project, to use that as a selective instrument, as a means of forcing institutional reality to yield to the singularity, to the intensive. If that makes sense. I'm hoping so. And again, this is the thing. Like there's a philosophical instability to a lot of this, because he says things like the conspiracy appears under the sign of the vicious circle. This is not the vicious circle does this or expresses this straightforwardly. Instead, it's under its sign. To me, that, again, how I read, I may overread all these things. I'm horrifying this way, but the idea here is that the conspiracy is almost haunting it. And it's haunted from the start by the structure that it's trying to deploy. The circle is not a tool that a sovereign can wield. It is underneath. It is a structure that undermines sovereignty. It goes underneath. It's in the belly of the beast. It's not the beast itself. It can't be used that way. The thing with Nietzsche, and Klossowski says it a lot, is that this conspiracy took place without him. It wasn't that Nietzsche agents sat down and went, I'm doing this now. The vicious circle dissolved him. And he's the thing it was supposed to operate through, which is crazy. The sign, that's the sign of the vicious circle. Right? And that's its own thing. Like, The circle is capitalized, right? Vicious circle. Vicious should be as well. I don't know why it's not in this version. It is in the French. Always is in the French. It's capitalized fully here too. In the English, they only capitalized the vicious circle. Has to do with how English works versus French, I think. I don't really give a fuck. I prefer saying the whole thing as a thing. The move we're now making, and as we start going through, is the concept itself as a governing figure. The vicious circle is now a thing. It is now a sign under which a project is conducted. All of this stuff, right? So this is the transition sort of really going, where we're moving from that schema earlier to the larger project, the eternal return as this dimension of thought, starting to make our way back. Everyone following there before we go to the next paragraph. Because I want to get one more paragraph done and then we're done with like this section of the chapter. So now would be the time, or forever hold your peace. Man, a bunch of you people just left immediately as soon as you got here. I had a huge number of people watching and then a fucking spike dropped off a cliff. I love it. All right, good. Everyone seems to be following acceptably well. Sunday viewers are feckless. That wasn't me. That was Rudd. Yell at him. So, because this is the last of this section, then we move into a lot more biographical again, which we'll save for next week. I've got a very hard stop at 2. I got a whole bunch of shit I got to do. But I want to sort of set this up right. Because we're making that, it's the final paragraph that makes that full move. Like from theory to like breakdown of the biography and how it works, and like a more materialist perspective, I think, what you might traditionally call that, at least. How I look at it, at least. It's a brief one. It's going to be talking about this, and we're kind of pre-organizing what's coming up in the next section. Every sentence here is kind of fucking really heavy, and I apologize in advance. There's a reason this is going to take like at least a half hour to go through, even though it seems like it's short and not very much is said. If we consider the experience that had just affected Nietzsche at Sils-Maria, which had appeared as a sudden thought and followed who knows what emotional upheaval, we might ask what relationship this thought had with Nietzsche's investigation into the symptoms of health and morbidity, which was becoming increasingly obsessive. Life invented this thought, he said. If it was the most profound impulse which emerged by signifying itself as the vicious circle, would it suspend this search for points of reference concerning what is healthy and morbid? How could Nietzsche consider himself privileged for having had this experience of the return? Between what was deteriorating in and around him and what was exhilarating him, there passed the breath of a catastrophe. He writes really well. I'm very jealous. Okay. We're just gonna go because I don't have time to like do too much of this, and it's already going to do a lot. If we consider the experience that had just affected Nietzsche at Sils-Maria, which had appeared as a sudden thought and followed who knows what emotional upheaval, we might ask what relationship this thought had with Nietzsche's investigation into the symptoms of health and morbidity, which was becoming increasingly obsessive. Okay. There's a handful of things that are brought in here, and we're going to be going through them at length. There's a handful of like upfront things. First, there is the experience that had just affected Nietzsche. This is not to say that it occurred to him or that it was thought by or the experience had by. It was affecting. He was affected. The There's a passive voice opening this. This is going to be so important as we go forward. It seized him. It wasn't produced by Nietzsche, right? I just used these words. There's a reason I'm going over it. The subject is not the agent of the eternal return. The subject is the site of it. Passivity is definitional. He had a sudden thought. Do you remember when we talked about this a little bit ago? It's a lightning bolt, a revelation, revelatory, satori, enlightenment, whatever. These things are there. These are not things that show up because he was spending time praying and then it happened, or that he was ruminating over things or thinking. That force of revelation effectively happened. There's no chain of reasoning that happened here. It didn't arrive through a cause and effect setup or an argumentation. It appeared as a sudden thought. Appeared is very important too, but I don't need to go into that as deep. So it appeared as that. And then followed who knows what emotional upheaval. We don't know. We don't know how deep this shit went for him. The impulsive depth that was there before, we don't know. And he's not making like a obviously clear historical claim. Oh, we don't really know because we can't be in Nietzsche's head. No. Nietzsche was, if you haven't read the writing around this, Nietzsche wrote a lot of shit. We're going to be going into more. He wrote so much shit around this time. But like, that's the point, is like, he's marking an opacity of impulsivity that precedes the thought and the way that it works. Who knows what emotional upheaval? The emotional upheaval can't be reconstructed from the thought itself. It doesn't have that kind of thing. We can't, in this case, to just steal a line from another great writer, you can't guess or understand where the wheat was grown by eating the bread. That's not how it functions. These things occur below these general levels of more logical production or factory style production. And as that here, the thought is almost irretrievable by any method. Even for Nietzsche, he didn't write about this somehow because it's already, again, a gregarious sign operation. It's not singular. It is structural fundamentally. And that's kind of a big deal here. As we've been talking, if you remember, I've been making a big deal out of that. So those are the three things up front. And because of those, we might ask what relationship this thought had with Nietzsche's investigation into the symptoms of health and morbidity, which was becoming increasingly obsessive. So that's the deal we're about to be going through, right? How do these registers, the eternal return experience and his investigation into health and morbidity, which is what he was writing at the time, do these relate? Do these come together? Do these work as a thing? Is there vibes between them? Is there resonance or any of those things? He calls them obsessive. Nietzsche's investigation at this point, it's a safe way to put it. It had the character of obsession. I wouldn't even say it. It was absolutely clearly like pushing forward in this impulsive, crazy way. It wasn't a rational curiosity. Again, these are terms utilized by the gregarious for reasons. We'll be getting into that. Nietzsche wasn't like studying symptoms. Like, yeah, so now I'm going to go home. Like, that's not the thing. He was studying them because it was his own condition at stake. Because it was his impulsive life. Because the material he was working on and being worked over by were pushing him to do so. So the question is, right? The eternal return, the thought of the eternal return arrived in the milieu of this obsessive self-diagnostic project. Did it resolve the project? Does it transcend the project? Does it suspend the project, or does it complicate the project, deepen the aporia beyond any resolution that Nietzsche could have? We'll be seeing that. The answer is, of course, that last one. I'm not very good at, hiding that. Like, there's a reason I do the order of things I do. But that's what is the thing. The thought of the eternal return doesn't solve health and morbidity. It makes it absolute, makes it undecidable, because the very criteria that you would evaluate the thought through is itself put into question by the content of the thought. Yes, that's how I'll phrase that. I really like this book. I'll say that just too many times, maybe. I like this phrasing so much. Life invented this thought, he said. I love that he attached to this line so much. Nietzsche said this about the eternal return and the experience of it. This is one of his letters. And the aphoristic Nietzsche is so clear here. But again, this is not a minor statement. This is Nietzsche wrote this. Nietzsche didn't create the eternal return. He didn't invent the eternal return. What a statement for Nietzsche to say, given that he's the fucking guy who conceptualized it, as far as I'm concerned. Life invents thoughts about its own recurrence, because it's not a thought that life happens to have, right? It's a thought whose content about the eternal recurrence of life is enacted in the process of its own emergence. So it's an instant of what it is thinking. Life returns to itself through the thought of its own return. It's maybe the best. It's such a great fucking line. I just like it. Fuck discovery, fuck instantiation. The eternal return isn't a theory about life. It is life's recurrence happening as theory, performed in its own arising and structuration. Ugh. I love it. I love Nietzsche. I love Klossowski. It's good. So he goes on. If it was the most profound impulse, which emerged by signifying itself as the vicious circle, would it suspend this search for points of reference concerning what is healthy and morbid? This is almost, it's almost like, rhetorically, it feels humorous to me. There's a reason I laughed. There's a hypothesizing that is like, if the eternal return experience is the most profound impulse, the deepest, craziest, biggest thing we can experience, if that's the one underlies everything, well, then what happens to the investigation on health and morbidity? But that doesn't work anymore, because the structure, like the investigation, again, the points of reference that Nietzsche was using, right? What is healthy, what is not? We saw the schema earlier. These are fixed coordinates on that schema. And Nietzsche was using these to orient himself, to evaluate experiences. He was talking through his thoughts of like, oh, I see when I talk about health, oh, it's related to these things. He's doing this. But all of this, he realized, is perpetually deactualized. It becomes a suspended search because it undermines the premise of the thing itself. You can't search for stable diagnostic criteria within a circle so vicious that it makes the criteria itself unstable. The eternal return as vicious circle renders the very project of finding these coordinates impossible. This is not because health and morbidity don't exist. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's just that they don't have a fixed position outside the circle. There's no outside the circle. There's no fixity at all. And so Klossowski is sort of playing with that. The suspension in this way only works if the thought arrived with enough deactualizing intensity. But that can't really happen here. The thought may have been like a very particular symptom of the morbidity that it seemed to transcend. So he says, would it suspend the search for points of reference concerning what is healthy and morbid? If it was this, which emerged from this thing, it's not really a yes or no. That's not it. It's just indistinguishable. It's just indistinguishable. And that's the last little bit here, which I really like, how he tops this off so we can go. How could Nietzsche render himself privileged for having had this experience of the return? How? Nietzsche does claim privilege here. The way he writes about it in like Ecce Homo, which you can read. We're going to be reading actually literally in the next thing. See, spring 1888. That's Ecce Homo, letters, and all of that. The way that he talked about it, like we've already gone over, the highest tonality of the soul. He considers himself a singular case, like a wave. The exceptional intensity of it that destroyed his institutional world, that there's a privilege he's talking about, right? The privilege is a deactualizing force that we just went over. How the fuck do you get to privilege, though? Like, privilege requires a reference point. It requires something in relation to which the experience counts as privileged, rather than just like heightened. But even heightened, you're comparing. How do you do that? It's a singular. The singular doesn't exist this way. How the fuck does he do this? Like, even worse. Sorry, someone, am I talking over? Oh, Josh you're back. You got something?
Nope, sorry about that.
No, you're good, my friend. I'm just trying to get you to talk more, that's all.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Love your thoughts. He's making actually a really extreme point here that's really interesting, and it feels like, that's why I love it. It feels like he's undermining himself. He's not. He's making a point that he'll be coming back to later. But like the schema of morbid and healthy, the experience of Sils-Maria 100% could be seen as that thing. Like he's fallen apart. Just as do that. Just call it that. Right? We could just say that. It's a euphoric intensity that some pathological states have, right? The censoring voice that we talked about earlier, the tyrant inside of us who says, this is something of a morbid desire, all that shit. We would say this about the Sils-Maria event. Like he's performing the act. Klossowski's writing here and performing the act itself. It's really crazy. And there's this weird double bind that Klossowski's trying to bring to a head right before we get to the next little bit. Okay. The experience that was supposed to like suspend morbid, healthy, singular gregarious investigation itself actually massively, maximally exposed the judgment of it. The singular case can't certify its own singularity from within the terms the vicious circle rendered. So how the fuck does he do that? Because he does, by the way. He does. He totally fucking does. He totally does. We've been reading his shit. Between what was deteriorating in and around him and what was exhilarating him, there passed the breath of a catastrophe. Between what was deteriorating in and around him and what was exhilarating him, between those two, catastrophe doesn't really coincide with deterioration. It also doesn't coincide with exhilaration. It's something that passes between them, in the gap, in their simultaneity as a thing. Again, another thinker who really loves sort of topology as a whole thing. The catastrophe is not in either state. It is in their co-extension, their co-occurrence. The fact that they become indistinguishable. The breath of catastrophe is the thing that fills the space of indecidability between the two of them, between what was deteriorating and what was exhilarating him. He had a migraine-ravaged body falling apart with failed relationships, a lot of stuff that was really not great. If you don't know Nietzsche's, we'll just say loved and lost is a different phrase for the guy. That ultimately led to like this crazy like isolation and like incel adjacent behavior as a thing. His breakdowns from institutional life and not wanting to talk with anyone, the hatred of the cultures that he was in and the European nihilism he began to see, the triumph of the herd, the death of God. Like it's we'll just say depressive category is kind of an easy way to talk about that. At the same time, the eternal return experience itself happens. This sense of having the thought of thoughts, the terrible and beautiful revelation that he talks about, 6,000 feet beyond man and time. He writes to Gast. We'll be going over the language again around Gast in a second, next week. But like, so ridiculous. The high tonality of the soul, all of that. And it's the breath, the breeze, the exhalation, the breath of catastrophe, the sighing, the breeze, that something that is almost imperceptible. It is a movement of air. It is not an event you see. It is not a thing that people feel. It is it's a breath in French. It means, is also a souffle. There's a reason that we call the thing we cook a souffle. It's intended to be this soft breath. Like if you've never made a souffle, I highly recommend you do it so you understand what the fuck I'm talking about when I say this. It is about the subtle, like that there's almost nothing there. It isn't really meant to be like a full meal, a full dessert. It's not a heavy thing. It's not a mousse. It's a breath of a thing. It's intended to capture that. It doesn't announce itself with thunder. It doesn't scream. It is a thing between exhilaration and deterioration, both without reducible to one. And catastrophe, they're passing the breath of catastrophe, the deactualizing of all of it, the conspiracy that executes itself without conspirator, I think is the phrasing Klossowski will use. The Sils-Maria becomes the domino that really starts what ends up being in Turin. If you don't know, Turin's Nietzsche didn't have a good day in Turin, I would say. I think it's a safe bet as a thing. And with that, that's going to be today's reading. Because next week, because the rest of this, there's no way for me to like start reading and not just like, this is like, if I start here, this is explanatory paragraphs all the way through of Nietzsche's text, literally visiting this. Next week is going to be so fucking long. Next week will probably be like 3 or 4 hours. Because we start going through his posthumous fragments as Klossowski literally starts putting this in place. As he starts going, here is proof of what I'm saying. Here is how this works. Here is Nietzsche saying this. Here's Nietzsche saying these things. That as he's done so far and really brought the theoretical to the embodied, that's what we are going to be spending our time doing, is how is this investigation working? How did these things work? What is the inevitability of things? How did obsessivity come to be important? How did the Turin breakdown factor in? All of these things is going to be center to it. It's going to be a big deal. With that, I'll ask for any questions. If anyone's got any, now would be the fucking time, because I have 5 minutes. That's all you get. That is all you get. That is all you get. All right. God, I'm so tired. So tired. All right. I guess with that, I'm going to send you off. Pete Hegseth is holding a press conference, and you can go watch that on YouTube. What's the short essay Deleuze wrote on fascism called? A short essay on fascism. A short essay on fascism. I'd have to think about that. I don't know. What would that be called? What the fuck? I don't, my brain is trying to work that out. Fascinating. And nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. I mean, I can name a lot of stuff where he talks about fascism. He wrote about the different ways fascism was categorized. Jesus Christ, Brooks. My brain's not doing it. Ask in the QC, John. We'd love to have you. Discord.gg/DGQC. Love to have you. Ask there. Someone will literally be able to get you a PDF. We have it, and I can't remember the name of it. And that's it. I need to get more tea in me. I've got to go dad it up, and then I've got to finish off my video that I'm going to be posting for tomorrow. And then I've got one coming this weekend, and then next week is another 5 partial objects as we lead into basic bitch capitalism, which I think is I'm excited for. So you too, I will send you off. Enjoy Pete Hegseth lying to you about everyone dying. It's terrible. Was it Postscript Society's Control? That could be the one he's talking about. I am thinking of a different one. Yeah, I mean, it might be. Well, this is the thing is like, and Josh's is like, it's the preface to non-fascist life. It might be. There's a couple pieces that I think work for this. But like the cat, because I was going to say also like Mille Plateau has a really good section on it as well, but I don't think he's asking for like Mille Plateau. So, yeah. Ask in the QC. We will absolutely get it to you. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone. If you like what I do, support it. Patreon.com/DGQC. $5 a month makes a huge deal. Otherwise, Stream Elements links in the chat. Always great, always wonderful. And I will see you all